Do I even care about this little intro anymore? I don't think so. So hi, I'm Wren. Alright, today we're going to be talking about HRCYED, the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. I'm going to be honest, it really was the spreadsheet that really drew me into this readathon. So if you don't know what HRCYED is, I'll try and leave all the information down below, but it is a year-long readathon starting on the 6th of July, going until the 5th of July, the following year, you know? But it is being hosted by Stephanie from HRCYED. I will leave the links down below. Please go check out all of the videos, all of the resources. They've put so much work into this and it's honestly amazing. So what I've decided to do is to kind of keep myself accountable and keep myself on track is every 2 months, I'm going to film an update video. This very first update, we're doing, you know, the last couple weeks of July and then all of August. So in July, I counted 6 books towards HRCYED. So the first one I read was Oh How We Laughed, which was a South Australian anthology by queer and disabled authors. I think I got that right. But I bought this when we were in Sydney for the Australian BookTube meetup, and it was just so fitting because I'm from South Australia, but I had to go to another state to find a book written by South Australians. It was very funny. But I did read this. I had a really good time and it really got me back into the vibe of reading anthologies. So I had a really good time with this, and I did end up giving this 5 stars because there were just some truly amazing little stories in there and I really, really loved it. But I was able to count this for 2 prompts, which I'm really trying to do 2 prompts per book because I'm not going to be able to finish the readathon if I don't do that. The first one was readathon because this was part of my Australian readathon TBR. Really glad I could smash that one out first out of the gate. And then the other prompt I used it for was around the world, because it's set in Australia. So I was able to tick off that prompt as well. And the next book I read was The Power of the Heart by Brooke Scobie. This was the 3rd book in the Yarn Quest middle grade series. This is such a fun little series. They're really, really short books. It's about these Indigenous kids that get in the first book, you know, they become aware of the story realm where a lot of ancestral stories, the magic there is real kind of thing. And these kids have kind of been tasked to help the story realm. But in this 3rd one, we were once again saving the story realm, and it was fun, and I think it was a good place to end the series. If it is ending at 3 books, I haven't heard of any more. So I gave this one a 4 star, which I'm pretty happy with. I think I gave the first one 3.5 or 4, and then the second one 5, and this one 4. So pretty good series all round. So the 2 prompts I got for this book were obviously readathon, because I read this for the Australian readathon, and then also Heritage Month. So I was able to count this for Indigenous Heritage Month. Stephanie said you don't have to read these books in the specific months, so thank golly for that, because that was probably not going to happen. This book series is written by an Indigenous author. It is illustrated by an Indigenous illustrator. It is about Indigenous characters and culture and stories and histories and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very good book and I would highly recommend this series. The next book I read was called Hotel Sexication by J.O. Mantle. This was a really short book. Meredith got this for me at a romantic affair. So this is a queer book. It's about this singer who suddenly became really famous. He got, you know, a lot of recognition, but he wants to go for a break. And he goes to this specific hotel. It's like a nudist hotel. And so he goes there and partakes. So this was a really fun book. I did have a lot of fun reading it. So I did end up giving this book 4 stars. It was good for what it was. You're there for a good time. Good times were had. That sounds weird, considering what the book's about. But you know, okay. Moving on. So I was able to use this book for 2 prompts. First one, Australian readathon. I read it for the Australian readathon, so I was able to count this for the readathon prompt. And then I also counted it towards the queer alphabet, because this is following a gay man main character. So next up, I read Red Dirt Heart by N.R. Walker. This was kind of a departure from stuff I normally read. In a weird way, I've read N.R. Walker before, love love some of their books. Like Upside Down, one of my favorite books. But reading about like people like on a like farm ranch kind of thing in like bush Australia, like full on outback Australia, that was like a different kind of thing for me. I'm not really a like a cowboy romance kind of person, and like these weren't cowboys, but there was definitely that cowboy element to them. This book is about this gay man who has taken over his father's farm business thing. Like he's doing well in his job, his employees really like him, everything's kind of thriving, but he is closeted. And then this younger Texan guy comes onto the ranch to do some kind of like I want to say like an internship almost. He's there to learn how, you know, Australia does certain things in regard to this like ranch system. You know, he's there to learn, they get together, it's a good old time. I did really enjoy this. It had some really great moments of just like real like Australianness. I did really like the characters, they were a good time. There was a bit of like found family element in there as well that I was just obsessed with. But I will say this book was like emotional. So I did end up giving this 3.5 stars. Like I said, there was some stuff I really liked in it, but there were a couple things that just didn't super gel with me, and I think that's just like a me thing, so go forth and read. So for this, I got 2 prompts as well. Of course, the first one is the readathon because this was part of the Australian readathon. And then the other prompt I counted this for was animals. Because in the animals prompt, you know, you have to read books that are like heavily featuring certain types of animals. So for this book, I used it for the farm animals. And so I used it for the horses because that is kind of what they are. Farming sounds so weird, but I don't know like the correct terminologies. But apart from that, you know, the main guy has a horse and it's like his best friend kind of thing, you know, so horses play a really big role in this book. So I was able to count that for that, which is really good because I was worried that I wouldn't be able to find farm animals. So the next book I read, I gave it 5 stars. Just to put that out there, I am utterly obsessed with this, and that is William by Mason Coley. This is a thriller horror. It's so good. So this scientist has created this robot and he's named it William, but like he keeps William behind a locked door. He's always really scared to go into like the workshop to work on William. He doesn't like being around William, and William starts like talking to himself. And he starts like building his own body, and it's all very, very creepy. And then some friends of friends enter the house to like just have a chat. During this time, the house gets put on lockdown and people start dying in like gruesomely horrific, amazing ways. And it's such a fun time. I had so much fun reading this. Like I couldn't put it down. I had to keep reading. So for the 2 prompts that I counted for this, the first one was subgenre of choice, where you choose a genre and then you have to read, I think, 5 or 6 books that are subgenres of that genre. So obviously I chose horror because I need more horror in my life and I always neglect it. So for this particular subgenre, I put William as a psychological horror because there are a lot of mind games happening in this. Yeah, it kind of messes with your brain, and it really makes you think about technology and how we use it and how it could use us kind of thing. Like, ooh, it was good. And then the next prompt I used William for was by the hundreds, and I put this in the 200 page count slot. And then the last book I read in July was Lemon Cake by Tanya Longoria. And this is the first book in a romance series. And in all of these books, there is a disabled main character, and there's a romance, and there is no third act breakup in any of the books. So I gave Lemon Cake a 3.25. It was good. It could have been better. So in this one, it is about a baseball player and I almost want to say former baseball player, but I don't know if she went pro. But this baseball player was doing some kind of, you know, event where kids were allowed to be involved. And one of these kids brings over his aunt. and his aunt is like his biggest idol, and she used to play baseball. And so, you know, the baseball player and the aunt, they meet and they kind of hit it off. And so they end up in a relationship. It's all very cute. She has a limb difference. She lost, I think it was a below knee amputation, and I think it was a car crash, potentially. So that is where like the disability rep kind of comes in. But this was a very like sweet romance. It was very simple, but you know, sometimes you need those kind of like palate cleanser books almost. So the 2 prompts I was able to assign to this book was obviously the disability rep one, because this character does have a prosthetic, and like I said, I believe it was a lower knee amputation. And then I also used this for the Heritage Month, and I used this for the Disability Heritage Month. That was all of July. Because of the Australian Readathon happening in July, I was able to officially complete 1 HRCYED square. So that's kind of cool that, you know, 1 month down, I've already got 1 prompt down. Like, that's pretty cool. Very happy for that. So then in August, I read 5 books. So the first one I read in August was Strawberry Cake by Tanya Longoria. So this is the second book in the Naughty Desserts series. And this one I ended up giving 2 stars, and it took me all month to read this book. In this book, we have our male main character is in a wheelchair after a car crash. His paralysis confused me. It seemed like he was only paralyzed from like just above the knee down. But like, I mean, this could just be my ignorance. I didn't know that it could be that low down if it was a spinal injury, which is apparently what he did have. I don't know. But he meets this woman in a like coffee shop. He's reading a book. She comes over and is like, oh my God, what's that book? And they hit it off. I also love that this woman is plus size. Like, that's awesome. Always love some plus size rep. And yeah, they have a very sweet romance. But this is where I'm stopping this series. I don't know if this is really shitty of me to say, but it really feels like if you took out the disability rep in these books, nothing changes. Like, I don't want the disability rep to be taken out. I want it to seem more genuine. It was so surface level, I guess. You know, I wanted to hear about, you know, the extra steps that needed to be taken to make accommodations. You know, like having this guy being bound to a wheelchair and him like moving around his house. And I'm like, okay, do you want to talk about having to have the kitchen counters lowered so he can reach everything? Do you want to talk about having in the bathroom to have the sink not have anything under it so he can get his wheelchair under it? Like, do you want to talk about the wardrobe and him not being able to use any of like the top storage and having everything down lower? Like, do you want to talk about anything? Is kind of where I was coming from. From what I've been able to gather, the author does not have any of these particular disabilities, and they've just gotten like, I think, sensitivity readers. But I guess it was just feeling like, you're doing this to sell books. It sounds really shitty. It might not be that. I don't know. I might just be taking things wrong, but it just wasn't the best. And then also in this book, the sex scenes, I don't think the woman ever enjoyed herself. You know, it was getting really frustrating that like nothing was happening. Anyways, for the prompts for this book, I chose not to put this as a disability rep because I didn't want to just put like this entire series in for disability rep. I wanted to switch it up and, you know, focus on different authors. So I only have 1 prompt for this book, and that is animals. I'm counting this for house pets because in this book, the female main character, she kind of like volunteers at a animal rescue, and she shows her boyfriend this picture of this cat that is like the grumpiest cat you've ever seen, and he decides to adopt the cat. It's a sweet cat, but that's about all I could count this book for. I mean, I guess I could count it for like a rainbow because the cover's completely pink, but I don't know how much effort I want to put into this book, you know? So the next one I read for this was Three Wolves Mountain by Boranano. Sorry, that pronunciation was awful. I'm very, very sorry. But this was a queer manga and I loved it. I thought I wouldn't like it as much as I did, but I ended up really enjoying it. And I gave this a 4.25. It was about this guy that lives on a mountain and he kind of like oversees a particular like cemetery. And then one day these werewolves show up. They're brothers. One of them is kind of stuck-ish in like, I would call like beta form if you have seen like Teen Wolf, but he is like mostly human but has like ears and teeth, and I think he has a tail sometimes, I can't remember. But then his brother is like full wolf, and they end up kind of just staying on the mountain, and this guy ends up kind of falling in love with the younger of the brothers, the one that's part human still. Like, the romance itself is somewhat typical of BL manga, where you don't really see much like development, but you will see other things. But what I really loved about this was a definite found family vibe. So the prompt I was able to assign to this was spooky creatures. And obviously this is going in for shapeshifters because they were werewolves, and there was definitely some shifting of shapes happening. I don't know if there's any other prompts I could really count it towards, and I don't want to fill HRCYED with manga or picture books, you know. I really want to try and focus on novels. So I'm only going to count this for 1 for now, but it was a good time. And if I end up reading another book with shapeshifters in the future, I might swap this out. Who knows? The next book I read was Lucas by MJ James. This is the first book in the Ember Town series. This is really good. I'm having a great time with this series. These are like very short books, but they're all paranormal, and it's all indie published as well, which is really cool. This Ember Town series is centered around this town called Ember, where supernatural creatures can kind of congregate and live, be slightly, you know, safe. But there is like a law system within the paranormal community. And this guy, Lucas, he is a bartender, and he doesn't know that a lot of his patrons are supernatural creatures, but he is desperately trying to save up for top surgery because he is a trans man. And just as he's, you know, saving up the money for his top surgery, he gets attacked by a vampire who illegally feeds from him, and then that turns him into a vampire. And the utterly horrifying thing happens where he can't make any changes to his body anymore because he's a vampire. So he now has to live with gender dysphoria for the rest of eternity. And that's fucking horrific. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I think one of my main criticisms was I want it to be longer and just a bit more internal dialogue. Like, I really wanted to see Lucas suffering. Maybe I'm just a sadist, but I like to see people suffer. Anyways, this was a really good book. It really created this whole world. And there's, like I said, there's this whole kind of legal system within the paranormal community. That was super fascinating. So I had a very good time with this book. And I was able to assign 2 prompts to this one. So the first prompt I used for this was the queer alphabet. So I used this for the trans space because we have a trans main character, and that is very much a focal point for like the first half of the book. And then the other prompt I used this for was the series staircase. And I'm putting this in for the 4 or more books. I didn't originally plan to have this as a series staircase book because I didn't want to like commit to a book series that I didn't enjoy. But I read the first one and I immediately needed to read the second one, and so on and so forth. So I am using this for the first book in the 4 or more book series, and I'm really excited to keep reading this. So the next book I read was It Rhymes with Takei by George Takei. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is a graphic memoir from George Takei. It talks about a whole lot of stuff that he went through in his life, and I didn't know he was such a huge activist like his entire life. That was really, really interesting to learn about. You know, some points in queer history that I didn't know enough about, and I got to because of this memoir. Really interesting, really, really good time. So I gave this one a 4.5 as well. And then the 2 prompts I was able to assign to this, the first one was the non-fiction prompt, where you have to read, I think, 5 different types of nonfiction. For this one, I could count it as a memoir. If I'm running out of nonfiction types, I might classify it as specifically graphic memoir, so I can read a different memoir. I don't know how that'll go, but for now, it's in for memoir. And then the other prompt I gave to it was an even bigger rainbow, and I used this as the 7 or more colors on a book cover, because there's like an entire rainbow on this book cover, as well as, you know, the colors on like people's clothes and everything. So definitely fits that. And then the last book I read for August was Phoenix by MJ James, which is book 2 in the Embertown series. And I also gave this one 4.5 stars. In this one, we are following the werewolf heir, I guess, because she is like next in line to be the alpha of the werewolf pack. But she's autistic, and we love this so, so much, but the pack don't see her as alpha material because of her autism, which is fucked up. So she has to really prove herself even more than she already would have to. And it's, you know, very overwhelming for her because autism plus heightened sensitivity because of werewolf, that also sounds horrifying. As, you know, as an autistic person, I was like, I didn't think about that in my, like, you know, deep desire to one day be a werewolf because I love werewolves. But in another life, I'd be a werewolf. But I never thought about the heightened sensitivity of your senses. Noises? Fuck that. Fuck that. So that was like a really interesting take on being a werewolf that I'd never considered. So I was absolutely thrilled to read about this. And Phoenix is now like one of my favorite characters. I love her so much. She's such a badass. My one big complaint with this book is that I wanted another 250 pages of just Phoenix, you know? And I think that might be one of my big gripes about this series, is that I just wish they were longer and like longer, more in depth, you know, really getting into the nitty gritty of some stuff. Thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I would highly recommend people to go and read this series. It's so good. But the 2 prompts I was able to assign to this, the first one obviously was the series Staircase, because this is the sequel to Lucas. So I'm already halfway there for that prompt, which is really cool. And then the other prompt I used for this was disability rep, because Phoenix is autistic and that is a huge part of her character and the book. Definitely fits for that. But that is all that I have read for HRCYED so far. So I've completed 1 prompt. I'm like well on my way with the animal prompts. I'm well on my way for the series Staircase, because getting that 4-book series going was really stressing me out. So now that I found one that I'm really enjoying, that has made things a lot better for me. But yeah, so that's all I've read so far. And I'm really looking forward to reading more books for HRCYED, because it's such a fun time. And it's also just really like broadening my reading tastes, which I love that as well. So please let me know down below how you're going with HRCYED. And if you have any recommendations for any of the prompts, let me know. Or if there's any you're struggling with, maybe I could help in some way. I don't know. But thank you so, so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.